So how close was it? I don't think he'll walk away because, let's look at the reality of it. It would be a lot of money that you'd be kissing goodbye to. I know he said without a compensation about compensation at the end of the Europa League final. Now, maybe that's because it's all been written down in black and white in his contract.
Too many of these quotes to look back at of our manager threatening to leave. Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is Inside United with Laurie Whitwell from The Athletic, of course. Jay Motta here as well. My name's Joe Smith. Laurie, the window is closed. The wheels, I wouldn't say have stopped, but we're starting to see a shape at Manchester United. The squad is kind of what it's going to be, although we will talk about is there potential for any goalkeepers to leave later on. There's a lot to sort of look back on and plenty to look forward to as well. But first of all, how are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Yeah,
very good to have you on. So soon after the last episode as well.
Yeah, well, listen, we're getting him in. I didn't see you in person last time, so I felt like I'd shortchanged you. I felt the viewers have been shortchanged. All three of us need to be in the room together to talk about the shape of Manchester United. What shape would that be, Joe?
It would be a spinning top. Do you know the one from Inception?
Okay,
where we're not sure if it's going to fall over at any given moment.
So this could all be a dream.
It could be a dream.
What level are we on?
Who knows? We'll find out hopefully by the end.
Is it a dream or is it a nightmare?
We'll find out by the end of this podcast, Laurie.
Okay, great.
There's loads to talk about, but I want to talk about a little look back at some of the ways United sort of went about things during the window and obviously how that will affect us going forward. So the striker search is an interesting one because we talked about not just the way we got Sesko in, but the way we got rid of Højlund is sort of important in all of this. We kind of went back and forth on who we wanted to sign. Sesko still hasn't started a Premier League game for Manchester United.
No.
I don't believe. So how did we go from the amount of options that we had all the way down to Benjamin Sesko, and was there sort of pushback and kind of a bit of push and pull on who we would actually go for in the end? Yeah,
I think certainly, obviously the first point was Liam Delap, right? Because that's who they were going to sign. He had a release clause. I think that was a big part of it. They liked him. The Premier League experience from the Ipswich year was important. Ultimately, he chose Chelsea, and then they worked through the list, and they had various options. We spoke about many of them. Victor Osimhen or Victor Gyökeres, but Benjamin Sesko was always there. He's been a player that they've scouted for years, even when they were looking at him when he was in Domzali in Slovenia when he was 16. He ultimately went to Salzburg and then Leipzig. I don't know if we've got into all the details on that on this pod here, but we can if you want to as we go along. But ultimately, United have certainly been watching him for a long time, and they decided eventually during the summer that now was the time to strike. Now, was it always part of their plan to get a striker in? That I think it was. It maybe altered slightly when they got Brian Mbeumo because they pivoted from Delap to Mbeumo. I still think they wanted a striker after that, and they kind of whittled it down in their minds to Ollie Watkins or Benjamin Sesko. And then I think the desire to go for him was, a collective decision, but the club are looking at it thinking he's a 22-year-old with resale value potentially in future, which I know you shouldn't really sign a player for Manchester United with that in mind as your first priority, but I suppose if you're trying to make a business successful, you're sort of thinking of that, at the back of your minds. So bring him in, and they have liked what he's done. He's not necessarily, I think we said on the podcast in Chicago, didn't we, where we were saying at that point I didn't sense there was active talks going on. I think something changed that kind of week on tour where they then decided to go for him. Newcastle were in for him. I think that kind of maybe provoked the situation a little bit. And so, but ultimately I think once United got involved and he missed out on the Arsenal opportunity, I think it was always going to be Manchester United that he selected. United did make a little check call on Hugo Ekitike as well, before he went to Liverpool, but they were already advancing in that. I think they were, they were too late on that one. Whether they actually wanted him over Benjamin Sesko, I don't know, but given the prices that were then, agreed for both players. But yeah, a lot to untangle there. Sorry, I've kind of just
no, it makes sense
a little bit, but anything that you particularly want to ask me about, obviously feel free.
No, I mean, it all makes sense because there were rumours, weren't there, about Ekitike. There was other rumours floating around, but we spoke to yourself, we spoke to Mitt, and there was always this sort of, idea that United had liked Sesko for quite some time. I think what sort of shocked us was just the speed of it all. Because it was literally like with Mbeumo, that went on for months. Yeah. With Cunha, again, it was months. But with Sesko, it was like we were linked with him, and then he was a United player. Even like with 4 days, and United aren't always that quick. That was what sort of surprised me, just the speed of it all.
I think they had to at that point, didn't they? Because they were sort of getting on towards pre-season. Obviously, he wasn't over in America, was he? I think you've got Sir Jim Ratcliffe at the top of the club, who is a co-owner with the Glazers, actually a minority owner compared to the number of shares they've got, but he is obviously influencing things to a big degree. I think he sanctioned that at that stage. I think we've mentioned the Iceland trip that happened. I think quite a lot of business actually got done around that, with Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada going out there, and Mbeumo got sorted literally as they were over there still before the Leeds game, after the kind of slow progress of that one, and then Sesko as well. So I think they've committed money, and I think they basically took a stance. We're going to go make these signings and back ourselves to make the sales after the event. Now let's see. I think the club feel like they're okay on PSR and FFP going forward from this point because of the outgoings, and obviously we're still to realise some of those in terms of loan options being triggered. But I think they feel okay at that. But I think the groundwork was already done really with Sesko, and at that point he wanted to move. You've got willing participants on both sides. Leipzig knew they had to sell him as long as United got to the right number, which they did, and they handled it in the way that I think Sesko and his representatives wanted it to be handled. I think that's why it was then a smooth process. But I do have. It was a quick one. I mean, that's Christopher Vivell, who we've mentioned before. Director of recruitment, knows him, I think, pretty well from the days at Leipzig and Salzburg when he was there as well. He actually was at the club when they joined. In terms of him actually being the one signing it off, I don't know the exact details, but I think he was important in that. Also, Matt Hargreaves, United's director of negotiations as well, as somebody who was on the ground in Leipzig getting the deal done. So I think United actually did act pretty quickly on that one, and now let's see, time will tell. It's been interesting that he's not started yet, right? Because
what do you think that's about?
I don't know. I totally take Amorim's point that you need perhaps some adjustment to English football, and certainly at Grimsby that was a pretty sort of rude awakening, wasn't it? I mean, I thought he did sort of okay really at Grimsby. I know he got a lot of attention for taking the 10th penalty. Amorim explained it by cramp, and okay, fine. But to not start yet, I think he's got some loyalty, fidelity to Mason Mount and how he's been playing. I know I'm the number one member of the fan club for Mason Mount, but I do feel like he has been playing pretty well.
It's a fan club that's been taking on a lot of members.
Do you think?
I think I've been won over a little bit with Mason Mount this season, because I've never disliked him or been against him, whatever, but I've yet to see anything that remotely makes me believe he's going to be a success at Manchester United. I'm still waiting. I think the jury's out going into his third season, but so far this season, the games he's played, he's been very good. I think he has, and it's just that injury, obviously, at Burnley, that is the big thing with Mason Mount. I think, perversely, his injuries have kind of helped him a little bit, because what the issue is with Mason Mount at United. He's just been injured. Whereas with Rasmus Højlund, you might question the quality, or Anthony or whatever. But if he can stay fit, then obviously when he has played, he's done well this season. But we've just seen another injury against Burnley, so we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But you must be feeling pretty proud of yourself right now.
Well, I don't know. Just nice that I wasn't totally lunatic about it. At least there was some reason for it. But I hope he's. I don't know what his injury situation is.
I wanted to ask you about that. Obviously, doesn't quite fit in this part of the conversation, but now we're here. Mount and Cunha, what do we know about those two?
The Cunha one looked more serious to me, just with the fact that he was holding his hamstring coming off, and it was whilst he was sort of going for the ball. The Mason Mount one obviously happened at half time, or at least that's when he was replaced, so we don't know exactly the sort of circumstances around it. I thought it was a bit of a precaution, the way that Amorim was speaking after the game, rather than it being something that's definitely going to keep him out for a while. He
sort of implied, didn't he, that he'd been playing on it for a little bit of the game, like he's played injured for 30 minutes or something, whatever he said.
And he mentioned about his history with it as well. So I think before he's had stuff where he's come back and felt okay, but then tried something like I think at the derby, for example, he hyperextended his leg, and it was a hamstring injury that then kept him out for quite a while. I think maybe as soon as he feels something now, he's like, okay, let's just take the precautionary route. I don't know though, maybe it is something more significant. I need to sort of check it out, but that might then bring Sesko starting to the table. I think if he doesn't start the next game, I think it would look odd, because you bought this player for a lot of money. You've obviously forced Rasmus Højlund out, so he needs to be starting games.
I mean, if Cunha and Mount don't play, you'd have to assume Sesko plays, because you'd almost be struggling to not play him at that point, wouldn't you? Just on the sort of the kind of reverse of that coin, then, is Rasmus Højlund, because he was the sort of in situ number 9 at Manchester United, played pretty much every week he was fit last season. I know that, you know, a lot of fans aren't keen on him and don't like him, or, you know, less of not liking him, but don't think he's a good enough player. But he played every week. He was always playing. Like there was a handful of games, I appreciate, where he was fit and didn't play, but majority of the time Amorim seemed to have some faith in him, the fact that he played him so often. Then all of a sudden he's playing in pre-season. We sort of spoke to Carl a little bit about this, and he kind of asked us our opinions with being out there in America. But obviously you know, might know more about it than us. What do you think happened for him sort of playing these pre-season games? There were reports even that United were deciding whether to get a number 6 or a number 9. Then clearly, like, the gears sort of clicked into place. It's a number 9, let's go for Sesko. And now Højlund can't even get any minutes, can't get off the bench, at times can't even get in the squad. How do you think he felt about that, and how did we get to that point?
I think this was always on the cards.
Right.
If you go back, I can't remember if I mentioned it to you guys on Talk of the Devils or whatever, but I sort of had an inkling that he might ultimately leave.
You did say that on here as well.
You said it a little while ago.
You said it before the end of the season.
Yeah, you were saying it was
around
more,
the end of the season.
So you know my memory's better than I do.
No, you were
Okay.
one of the first ones to say it's more likely he goes and stays.
Yeah.
One of the first journalists to say that.
Just because of knowing the situation, knowing United's intentions on the attacking front, and knowing that they needed money as well. And so whilst at that point then you've got Mbeumo and Cunha in, so you still need a striker, but he's your striker. So that was, to your point, the debate in number 6, number 9. Now it's fascinating. I'd love to know, truthfully, what Ruben Amorim's preference was, what Jason Wilcox's preference was, what Sir Jim Ratcliffe's preference was, because there's people that suggest to me that Ratcliffe's preference was for a striker. So then if he, you know, and United will probably push back on that and say it's a recommendation to him, and then he obviously makes an ultimate decision, and with the Glazers they've got to sign things off as well still. So, but I think there's certainly a few people saying that was what his intention was from Ratcliffe for a striker. So then they're going for Sesko, so then they have to accelerate things with Højlund. They have to make it so that he agrees to leave, because he did not want to leave. You know, he's, you know, some people have said to me that he's heartbroken over leaving United. He grew up a United fan, playing for the club, and you shouldn't just keep somebody around because, you know, that, but certainly it then influences the kind of approach, the kind of practices that you're going to have to employ as a club to get what you want, really.
It's a little bit horrible, really, isn't it? Like, the more he wants to be here, the nastier we have to be to him to convince him that it's not worth staying.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if someone didn't care and didn't want to be here, you know, I don't think it's been difficult to find sort of Anthony or Sancho maybe a way out of the club. I know it took to the last day, but that's because of other things. But with Højlund, it seemed like he was literally telling us in pre-season, I want to play.
He came out, didn't he, after that game in Chicago, wasn't it? He scored twice, let's say, and I think he did. And he looked for people in the mix zone. You know, he wanted to say his piece. And at that point, I think he knew he was reading the room. I don't know if at that point or if it came slightly after that, but he was told somewhere in Chicago on tour, we're going to go for a striker. Now, to my knowledge, I don't think he was told, and we're going to sell you. But so some people attribute that to him being, you know, a nice guy and loving the club. But I think that then he sort of understood what that would mean for him. So he wanted to come out publicly and say, I want to stay. And that's why it took so long, really. There was lots of clubs in for him. If he'd have agreed to it, it could have happened a lot sooner. But I think he was waiting just to see how the land settled with United, with the squad. He backs himself as a player. I think he thinks he's better than Sesko, for example. So he was thinking, well, if I show that in training, then maybe Ruben will have a different mindset. But I think ultimately the decision had already been taken, and therefore it was a case of, you know, what's your best option? And now Napoli looks like a really fantastic option for him. Champions of Serie A. Scott McTominay's gone there, been rejuvenated, been nominated for Ballon d'Or. Imagine if Rasmus Højlund goes there, you can see him scoring a few goals. I mean, obviously that's where he played for Atalanta, and he had that hot streak at the end of the season that then United bought him. So, and it's obviously a great city, you know, get the pizzas in, get the fresh tomatoes that Scott McTominay has been raving about.
It just tastes like water in England, Jay. Whereas over there, he's eating them just with a bit of salt on them. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Tomatoes were good in Chicago, weren't they, to be fair?
Yeah, no, they
anyway.
they were nice. No, it is mad.
What do you feel, Jay?
With Højlund, because I've got to the point where I was sticking up for him a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't truly believe he was the levels that he needed.
Yeah.
But the crowd were on him, social media was on him, and it wasn't for a lack of trying. It was questions around the quality rather than the effort. I think he was always trying. It's just was he good enough for Manchester United? And I don't sort of criticise anyone who's at United who wants to stay at United and fight for the place. I think that's an admirable quality, and I think we've not had enough players who've been willing to do that over the years. A lot of them have just been sort of, almost here with their hands or their arms sort of tied behind the back, sort of being forced almost to be here. And then as soon as they go and get tough, they're like, we can't wait to get out of here. Whereas with him, he obviously wanted to stay and fight for his place, and it is a bit of a shame, but I think it's for the best that he moved on, like we've all said, because it was the atmosphere just in the ground around him was bad. And the fact that even after those 2 goals, and I agree with you, I think you've said it a few times against Bournemouth, he got both of those were really his goals. He made the last touch before they went in. Didn't seem to alter anything, did it?
No.
It just seemed to sort of almost be irrelevant.
I think I suppose he represents the past in terms of the eyes of Ineos, Ratcliffe, the new football leadership. He was signed by the previous regime. And so if you're trying to build something new and it hasn't worked out for him, it's not like you're kind of latching onto a player that's been brilliant and we'll just let him continue. I think, and it's such a pivotal part of the pitch that they're probably thinking, let's just change this. Let's not wait around. But there was some debate, as we touched on earlier, midfield, and obviously then goalkeeper comes later. But it was certainly they needed to address the attack, didn't they, given how few goals they scored last season.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Danny Welbeck.
Oh yeah,
because he's one of Jay's favourite players, and I don't know how much of that has become a sort of inflated version of Jay's true feelings over time, with United being so
absence
poor.
makes the heart.
Yeah, is there an absence makes the heart grow fonder element to all of this?
You start saying something, don't you? You have to sort of double down.
Yeah, it's gone from being like, you know what, Danny Welbeck was actually a good striker at Man United to the greatest player United have ever had.
It's Danny Welbeck, Bastian Schweinsteiger and Sofian Amrabat. That should be the Trinity statue outside Old Trafford, right? If I had my way. Yeah.
They've won some trophies. Exactly. Amrabat has won the FA
Not
Cup.
many of them at Man United. In the case of Bastian Schweinsteiger. But, he's got, 9 Bundesliga. That's got to be worth a statue,
Why
surely.
Is it a statue outside Old Trafford?
Why does it have to be what they did for Man United to be a statue outside Old Trafford?
So narrow-minded, isn't it?
Boring.
Yeah.
He's got a World Cup for Man United in a way.
Do you know what it was, though, with Danny Welbeck? It sort of reminds you of, the flaws, because I love Danny Welbeck, and if he came back to Manchester United, I'd be buzzing. But it's like, he's just had a really good season. He scored 10 goals. Yeah, nice. The first time he's done that in the Premier League, you think, what?
And also, Rasmus Højlund got 10 goals last season, and he's been hounded out of the club.
Not in the Premier League.
That sort of gives you a little reminder that, okay, perhaps some of us have elevated him slightly. I know he did score 9 for United in the season, but it's not 10. So what went down there? How realistic was that? Was Welbeck? Welbeck. Sorry, it's going to happen. Yeah, as everyone keeps mentioning to me on Twitter and in the comments.
They looked at it. Yeah, I think it was early on in the summer, so it would have been as a kind of secondary striker, a low cost option. It wouldn't have been the one instead of Benjamin Sesko. Let's kind of clarify that.
Pathetic.
Yeah, but. Yeah, so they looked at it, right? And, I don't know what Brighton would have wanted for him, but I don't think it would have been breaking the bank. He's 34 now, 35 in November. I would imagine so, right? Yeah. And obviously it's kind of deja vu, right? Because this is what we were talking about at this kind of stage last season when I found out that United, Eric Ten Hag wanted him at that club. So I thought it was
They all wanted him.
I thought maybe it was a Dan Ashworth thing as well, because he'd signed him, I think, for Brighton.
Right.
So, but no, I think the new football leadership team were sort of debating it. Ultimately, they didn't make a formal offer because the idea would have been, I think, a 2-year deal, which I know sounds like a lot, but I think the way that I think that's what United would have needed really to get him on board at Old Trafford, and ultimately I think it was a 1+1 that they were kind of debating. In the end, they didn't progress with it. Again, you've got people involved, football level, but also to Jim Ratcliffe sort of debating this kind of thing, and it wasn't formalised. But it would have been, I don't know, I'm like you guys, I'm a bit romantic, and I'm not so saying just get all the old guys back, but he's a local boy as well as being a former academy player, and is still doing it for Brighton. I know he didn't have the best game against Everton, to say the least, missing a pen and missing that chance, but I think the kind of technical quality that he has, the background, just being around younger players and kind of trying to help drive that mentality for sort of pushing yourself and being the best you can be, I think would have been an interesting sort of character to throw in the mix.
I'm surprised he wasn't desperate to join back at any cost.
Yeah, it seems a
little bit.
little bit odd that he's like pushing for this.
I think he's happy at Brighton, isn't he? And
Yeah.
I think they've looked after him, and so yeah.
I suppose
I don't know how far it got in that sense. I think it was a United kind of let's debate it and let's see what it might entail, and ultimately said financially for the age that he is, it doesn't make sense for us.
As romantic as it is, it does make sense that we didn't want to give him a 2-year deal, to be fair.
When did the idea of a older backup sort of journeyman, whatever you want to say, striker, leave the table then? Because obviously we didn't end up signing a Welbeck or anyone of a similar profile to Danny Welbeck. It was just Sesko.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin came into the mix seriously as well. He would have been available on a free, wouldn't he? Ended up going to Leeds United, younger than Welbeck, but not with that same romantic attachment to the club. I don't know when they decided, actually, let's just leave it as it is. Maybe you look at the squad and think, okay, at that point, maybe they weren't sure exactly how it would shape up the attacking sort of options for Amorim, and then as the season goes on, pre-season goes on, you're sort of thinking, okay, let's leave it here. We've tried Mason Mount, for example, up there, or Cunha. We feel like that as a rotation could work in certain games. We don't necessarily need to add another absolute striker into the mix there. Xerxes, you sort of forget about a little bit as well, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know when it actually left the table. They considered it.
Talk to me about Project 90.
Oh yeah.
Because we've got Project 150.
Yeah, come on.
What are the other ones we've got?
Mission 21.
Mission 21.
Love
Mission 1.
Mission 1.
For the women's first
Mission 1.
top flight title.
Yeah.
Mission 21 obviously win the 21st title. Project 150 tied in with Mission 1, get United back to the top by the 150th anniversary of the United's formation, basically.
Yeah.
Now I'm hearing Project 90. What's that?
Yes, more projects. There was a comment on the Athletic piece that was like, how about Project Win Some Games, which you know,
it's a start, isn't it?
I think that's the idea of Project 150, to be fair, the ultimate aim. But yeah, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it, when these, and this is like an internal thing, so you know they're not advertising this to the wider world necessarily, so maybe it's a little bit unfair to pick it apart. But I think when the aim, the people want results on the pitch, don't they? So you know, kind of projects and things like that feels a bit secondary. But the idea is to crystallise the fact that they want to improve the balance sheet every year by £90 million. So obviously that's the big thing that, you know, Ratcliffe came in having issue with, the fact that United's cash levels were low and remain low, and really to touch on the kind of spending that they've done this season, you know, that revolving credit facility that they've tapped into since the pandemic really has been tapped into again, we feel, but we'll get full disclosure I think in the annual results that come out pretty soon actually, or at least for the previous year. And so that's the idea, to raise revenues, so i.e. better trading with players, commercial deals to feed into that, cutting costs. That's obviously the big thing that Ratcliffe felt was a bloated company, expenditure being too high. Let's see. I think it is, certainly there was stuff to cut at the club, I'm not disputing that, but I think also getting the commercial deals they did does take some money as well to spend. You know, you kind of need to spend a bit to make a bit, and so it'd be fascinating to see if they are able to bring in those kind of deals that the previous lot did really, and then also trade players in the way that they think would then raise the overall balance sheet. But Project 90, it's the kind of crystallisation, internal workings at the club about improving the bank balance.
I mean, you know, makes sense, but it's not exactly like you say, when as a fan you're not like, oh great, this is something that I can really sink my teeth into. I mean, you need it, don't you? You need like to have these sort of like conversations and to have a well-run football club. But like you man on the
you want action now, don't you? You want, like, it's all fine sort of speaking
like,
it,
these promises and these plans, it's like, okay, I get it, but it's not something that sort of gets you excited. It's not like a last minute winner or anything, is it? It's like
Project 99.
I
think the bit that for me feels the most like on pitch relevant would be the wages. The player wages in particular.
Yeah, that's true.
Because when you look at, I know obviously some of them are still technically at the club, but when you go back 3 seasons, I think it was, United's salaries have come down by like tens of millions. I think it might even be 100 million. I don't quote me on that, but it's drastically reduced from, I think it was at its peak in the 22-23 season with the likes of Varane and Ronaldo obviously, and I think Rashford, I don't know if he'd signed a new big deal, but Martial was on decent money. Look, like there's a lot of players and I think it was that crossover when we just got Ten Hag and Ronaldo was still here.
Yeah.
And since then, the number of players on 250 grand a week or more has come down massively. Like Eriksen was on a lot, Rashford was on a lot. I know he's still here, but we're not paying his wages. Sancho, similar story. Ronaldo is obviously gone. Varane has obviously gone. Cavani's obviously gone. We had a lot of players on big money. Most of our biggest earners aren't being paid by Manchester United anymore, or they've left entirely. So I think that's the side of it where you go, actually, yeah, you know, people losing their jobs I don't like. Some of it I don't really care about. But the stuff that is interesting to me is the fact that we've clearly had a big concerted effort in. No one's on 300 grand more than anyone else anymore. And realistically, all the new signings, all the reports are in that 150 to 200 kind of mark, aren't they? So that, I guess, would make a big difference over time. Yeah,
I think they've taken a really deliberate approach to wages and tried to keep them within the pay structure. And it's difficult to ascertain exactly what people are on, right? Yeah. But it does feel like they're within that ballpark, as you say there, Joe. Obviously, the Champions League cut is a big thing, right? Like, so
Onana wasn't too happy with that, was he?
No, he wasn't. Yeah.
This is the most bizarre thing ever. We were talking about this on the podcast earlier. Like, what is that about?
Yeah, so I mean, to my knowledge, it was after his first season when obviously they didn't qualify for the Champions League, and then the cut comes in, and like I don't know, did he know that it was definitely going to happen? I'm sure he would have been aware that was part of his contractual terms, but to my understanding, he was sort of at that point saying, let's discuss a new deal. I think there was some interest from Saudi Arabia, which obviously would have been a lot higher, I think, than what he was on. Ultimately, nothing happened with it, and so but I think that sort of has been rumbling along in the background a little bit for a while still. So I don't know if he's actually sort of said, you know, I want a higher wage this summer, but I think it's certainly part of his thinking overall. I think there's still some dissatisfaction, should we say, about that.
I don't know. Yeah, it just when you know, obviously we don't know the ins and outs of it, but as an idea of him. He
caught fire there. I wasn't anticipating it being so.
Even broaching the subject of a new deal or a better contract or anything like that, it's ludicrous. Yeah. Because it's not like we didn't qualify for the Champions League despite him being brilliant. It's like he was a big part of the reason we didn't qualify for the Champions League, and he was certainly a big part of the reason that first season why we got knocked out of the Champions League.
Well, it's going to be really fascinating. Like, obviously they've signed a new goalkeeper in Senne Lammens, and Altay Bayındır has been starting in the Premier League. I mean, maybe we can get into it a little bit, but I think there's, aside from the fact that he was injured in pre-season and, you know, perhaps not the best last season, which again, I don't know, people have definitely different views, but it's clearly he made a lot of mistakes. I think there's something else perhaps going on there with. I don't think Amorim's happy with him, you know, essentially. I think did I mention this on the podcast already? But the fact that he came back and then got injured sort of straight away, I think was irritating, shall we say, to people.
Why would that be irritating? Because obviously to me, as a non-athlete, I just think you can't help when you get injuries, whatever. Was the assumption there that he's not come back in the right physical shape to be playing for Manchester United? Why would that be infuriating for the manager? I mean, obviously it'd be infuriating, but why would it annoy him about Onana rather than for Onana?
This is it. So again, you know, I caveat it by saying I'm not there, you know, witnessing this, but to my understanding, that was something that, you know, caused frustration for Amorim, because, you know, you're off on your summer and you come back for pre-season. You're not supposed to get injured straight away. Like, I know it's maybe sounds a bit off to say that. I do take your point. People can get injured at any point, and I don't know what the right and wrong of this situation is, but this is what I've been told in terms of what United have viewed it. Okay. And I think there's certainly a view that he shouldn't have been getting injured after the first couple of days, basically. Okay. But yeah, let's see if it ever kind of been spoken about in future.
So do you think that's why Onana has not just been like replaced, but he's gone from being first choice keeper to now potentially third with Lammens coming in? Because I know that some people will say Onana's the worst keeper we've ever had and all that, but in terms of watching Onana and Bayındır play, I don't feel any more confident when Bayındır's playing. Yeah. And actually, I think at least at times with Onana, we have seen spells of games where he hasn't made mistakes. It's not just every single game, whereas it feels like at the moment, Bayındır, most weeks it's something to worry about. Why do you think he's dropped so far down the pecking order?
Well, we'll see, won't we? I think it'd be really fascinating to see what he does with Lammens, you know, straight out the gate, because as we've reported, you know, Amorim was sort of voicing a preference maybe, or at least it's certainly a satisfaction with Emi Martinez if he'd have joined. But instead they've gone for the younger goalkeeper, you know, so there's clearly high hopes for him, but only one season in the Belgian top flight so far. So, I mean, Manchester derbies is certainly an interesting place to make your debut. Obviously, just ask Patrice Evra. But so it'd be interesting to see where Onana fits in all this. But I think that's been kind of lingering in pre-season, really, in the background. Right. So that's why it wasn't. So I originally thought Onana would come back into the team for the Arsenal game because he is the number one. But I do think it's changed that in Amorim's mind, and he's not really given sort of public statements that would push against that sort of backing Onana, has he? He's kind of said, I'll make my decision and you'll find out, basically. But even when you think back to last season, at the end of last season, Bayindir started the last game, didn't he, against Aston Villa. Tom Heaton was on the bench, and at that point it was Amorim sort of saying, I don't know, kind of letting him refresh or clear his mind or whatever. But then he went on post-season tour still after that. So it maybe in hindsight that actually did feel like quite a telling decision from him at that point, because it came after the Europa League final where that shot from Brendan Johnson, could he have done better? I don't know. Again, it's a little bit open to debate, but I do think that all those things put together, plus then you also throw in Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I think it was to the BBC, when he was talking about players that they're still having to pay for that they didn't buy. He mentioned Sancho, he mentioned Onana, Casemiro, I think as well he mentioned, and obviously they
mentioned Højlund as well, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did.
So it's interesting, right, that he's mentioning these players that they obviously looked at selling Casemiro. In the end, he's come back into the team under Amorim. But so I think all those things factored together. United have got now a new goalkeeper, and Onana's place as number one is certainly not secure.
It's just a proper precarious position we're in it with like a new signing who.
What do you reckon?
I don't know.
What do you do?
I wouldn't play him in the derby.
Yeah.
I mean, you might get a different answer if you ask me a different day. But I just feel like if you play him in that derby and he has a bad game or he makes a mistake, you're almost not ruining his United career, but you're getting it off on such a shocker to start with. I know you mentioned Patrice Evra, that first 45 minutes, that debut where he got hooked at half time, but that's a defender. He was having a nightmare game, by the way. And
he's much more experienced, wasn't he? He played in the Champions League
final for Monaco. I think he was captain in that game as well, wasn't he? So it is different, and obviously you can't realistically sub your goalkeeper at half time unless you want to just end his United career after 45 minutes. So
Amorim subbed Xerxes after 30,
to be fair, he might even do that, but if he's having a stinker, you're stuck with him for the entire game, and he might not recover from that for a little while. So there's no easy answer, but I think you'd probably go with Bayindir personally, and it's not ideal. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I would like to see Heaton, but I just don't think that's going to happen. And also, unless maybe Onana goes to Saudi or Turkey or one of the places where the window's still open, maybe that happens. But if you're playing Heaton over your supposed second and third choice keepers, then what message is that for them? Because they're not all going to leave.
Bold call, wouldn't it?
It would be really bold, yeah. So I think personally, I would probably, with all that taken into account, I probably would play Onana. I think he's our best keeper that isn't Lammens. And obviously, if we're saying that we're worried about Lammens being a young lad coming in for that as your first game, but then on the other hand, is it not a great first game? Because obviously if you make a mistake and it costs you, then that's terrible. But that's terrible in every game. You know what I mean? Like Onana hasn't made huge mistakes this season against big teams. He's not played against any big teams. He's still got no credit in the bank. It still destroyed his reputation. Like his first game was Grimsby. If you're ever going to get a softball, go on. Like Lammens would love a game against Grimsby.
And he got a softball as well and he missed it.
And it was awful. So I think obviously bigger games have more scrutiny, so I do understand it, but he's got if we don't play him City, then is Chelsea too big a game? Maybe. And then Brentford, and it's Liverpool after
when
that.
You start it,
I don't know.
Flip side is if he has a brilliant game,
then it's amazing.
And then right there we go, we're off to a flyer.
Yeah, I remember Tahibe was man of the match at Anfield.
Even though he made
people
forget
in
that game. We mentioned it on the podcast this week, Joe.
Yeah, I know. I'm just with you.
Is that where you've got it from?
No, I remember. I could say Tahibe's career. It was at Anfield. I think we won 2-1. He was man of the match.
3-2.
3-2. Sorry.
Okay.
Stamford Bridge, was it 5-0?
5-0.
Yeah. And then Southampton 3-0.
Was it just those 3 games?
I think it was those 3 games.
Okay, I thought it was longer than that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Matt Letizia, P-roll through his legs. I was at that game.
Yeah, I was at that game.
He was at the other end and I was like, is he just what?
Yes, I'm pretty sure those are these 3. I might be missing one. Okay. Forgive me if there was another one in the back.
They're the 3 that stand out.
Yeah, anyway. But I remember it's always a reference of as disastrous as Tahibe was. a man of the match at Anfield. Doesn't get any better than that. No. And yet he's almost like
he's almost a folklore.
Yeah,
exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
He's getting it wrong.
Massimo Tahibi. Yeah. It's like the worst insult you can name at any United goalkeeper. So I don't know, man. I just feel it's too big a gamble for a young goalkeeper.
So you're saying who? You're saying Onana as well?
I get where Joe's coming from. I think if it, in an ideal world, Heaton would probably be the safest one, because even if he has a bad game, it's not the end of the world in terms of longevity. But I think Bayern realistically is
I think he'll start Bayern personally.
When would you bring Lammens in? Which game? Because we have a bit of an easier run from, I think it's like, and this is obviously miles away, like the 6th of November or the 6th of December, I can't remember. We play Newcastle, and then after that game we've got about 7 or 8 games in a row where it's like mid-table to lower table teams. I think you can't wait that long, can you?
I don't know, I think that, like, if Bayern plays against City and he does well, then you're alright. You can stick with him, and it's like, okay, he's had a good game, let's carry on. If he doesn't, then if you got Chelsea at home, then maybe bring Lammens in there and you go, look, we've got to do something. We can't just persist with Bayern if he's having a bad game every single game he plays, because I thought he made a mistake against Arsenal, he made a mistake against Burnley. This will be the 3rd game in a row where he's made a mistake if he does have a bad game. So I think you bring him in for the Chelsea game. And whilst that's not ideal, I think Chelsea's at home is a lot better than, obviously, the Etihad, or is it Brentford away and Liverpool away on the horizon? Anfield, Anfield. That's just, I don't think that's doable.
Yeah.
So just go for that.
Let's move into the midfield a little bit then, because this was the other thing, wasn't it, about who United are going to sign? And there's an interesting, I don't want to say revelation necessarily, but I think it was you that mentioned that obviously United went for Baleba and we're interested in Baleba, and we'll see how much that interest sort of persists over the next 12 months. But there was also talk that actually, sort of other than Baleba, it was someone in the Fernandes and Mainu kind of role that United were really keen on. Was it you that wrote about that?
I think
it was in the Athletic.
Yeah, Adam Crafton might have as well. I've got Mark Critchley actually in the, was it the Kobe Mainu piece that we did?
Yes,
I think it was that piece.
Okay, apologies. But what's your understanding of that then? Of what United actually wanted in midfield, and how come Baleba was only the sort of the main name that was mentioned, or you did mention a couple of others as well? Yeah,
there were options, weren't there? I think there was a period of time, wasn't it, in the summer, where they seemed to be talking to quite a few of them, because you're getting reports from various different countries. And yeah, Baleba, I think, was obviously one that they really would love to do. So that's why they pressed ahead to try and explore it, via intermediaries, and ultimately Brighton, said no, or he's going to cost too much. And then United made a direct call and kind of said, listen, as a courtesy, we're not going to pursue it, just to let you know. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because like everyone's sort of thinking, well, Brighton obviously wouldn't sell, but he's kind of had maybe a little bit of a ropier start to the season, Baleba. You're sort of thinking, maybe that was the best time to sell him, if he doesn't have a third season as well as his previous two. But so I certainly think that United looked at that situation, and I think the way that Amorim wants his midfield to work is you've got the kind of number 6 that's the Casemiro Ugarte that kind of pretty much stays in that midfield, picks the ball up off the defence, breaks play up, gives it to other players, and then that number 8, Bruno Fernandes, gets up and down, gets involved in attacks, and that's where they see Kobe Mainu, which is why then do we need a replacement for, do we need another player in that of that ilk, is interesting. But then I was kind of confused a little bit as to, because Baleba does get up and down, that's partly what his selling point is, but would he have just been then the number 6 next to Bruno Fernandes? It was, I still, maybe I'm not quite understanding it fully, but I sort of thought a number 6 was really what they needed, so that you're not having to rely on Casemiro. But then again, they bought Manuel Ugarte just last summer, so clearly people, I think it's a fair assumption he hasn't set the world alight. Is he good enough? That's the question. But maybe you need to give him a little bit more time to see, at least. I don't know if I've answered your question there, Joe, really. I've kind of just talked a lot about midfield. You're looking at me very confused, pensive,
I think that's fair enough.
uncertain.
It's not... I think that it was a little bit confusing, because if you're going to buy a Mainu/Bruno type of player, who are they replacing? Did they expect Bruno to say, actually, no, what, I fancy this Saudi move? Would they have then pushed on with a sale for Kobbie Mainoo? Because you've got two at the minute. We've sort of got two players in both positions. Mainoo can sort of draft in a little bit. I mean, in an act of utter desperation, maybe you could put Lissandro Martinez as the other defence, if we, in the case of real sort of decimating injuries. But we've basically got 2 8s, 2 6s playing alongside each other.
Yeah.
What would have changed if we'd have brought someone else in? If Baleba came in, does Casemiro go to Saudi? If a number 8 comes in, does Mainoo or Bruno go somewhere else? Like, I wonder what their thinking was. I don't expect you to know what the answers to all that, but it is very confusing because in the end we didn't go for anyone.
Yeah,
and you think, well, surely
I think they kept
Baleba the only
dry.
person that we like?
They obviously like a few, but if they think he's the one, let's go for that guy that we think is the one, rather than not waste, but spend money that we need later down the line to get the guy that we really want. Obviously, Liverpool did that, didn't they? With Virgil van Dijk, they waited another 6 months to get him from Southampton in the January transfer window, I think. But yeah, I don't think Casemiro would have left just because it's Saudi's been floated last 2 years and he hasn't gone yet. So there we are with that one. I think obviously going to see out his contract at United now. And yeah, would it have? The Kobbie Mainoo one's the interesting one, right? Because he obviously has to leave on loan. On a temporary basis, he wants minutes, but I do believe that United at different points in the summer were weighing up whether they would sell him, because does he really fit the prototype of what Ruben Amorim wants from his midfield? Clearly it's not quite right because he doesn't start him that much, right? No. Even when you go back to last season, I know he had the injury, and people can certainly debate about Mainoo wanting more minutes at the age that he's at, and just sort of saying you can be calm in this, you can be patient in this period of your career. But I think maybe he is sort of reading the room a little bit and thinking, I'm probably not going to play under this manager. So, yeah. So I think maybe would that have pushed him towards the exit door if they had signed? I don't know. That's fascinating to know. But obviously the strength of fan reaction was so strong. Does that come into their thinking a little bit as well? Like, I mean, I know we're sort of criticising previous regimes for reacting to fan sentiment, but I don't know if that did affect their thinking. Maybe it's for the best, because I feel like losing Kobbie Mainoo would have been just a sad episode really for United. I think he's the kind of player that United should be trying to bring through the academy, trying to celebrate and not sell.
I agree.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we've all spoken about it on this podcast in the past. We spoke about it with Carl the other day when he was on air. I think it's not just what he brings to the team, but also what it represents, like you're saying there, a player that has been at United for so long. And it's not just about being at United for so long. We've had loads of players, we've spoken about Danny Welbeck before. He was at United since he was 10 or whatever, and it didn't quite work out. But with Mainoo, every step of the way, he's sort of almost exceeded expectations. I think he was in the academy team when he was like 15, 16 as part of the FA Youth Cup winning side. He was a first year scholar for the FA Youth Cup winning side. So he was younger than his peers. First team at 18, FA Cup winner at the scorer, man of the match, and then in the England squad and in the England team for the Euros final as well. It's just been such a great career so far. Now it's hit a little bit of a bump. It'd be a shame if it was like, well, it's hit a bit of a bump, that's the end of that.
Go,
Do you know what I mean?
Imagine all the careers. You think of the class of 92, they were coming through. I know they were young. I mean, certainly Ryan Giggs was, but like Scholes was like 21, 22 really when he properly came through.
Scholes has said that only about Mainoo at 18, 19 compared to how Scholes was at that age.
He's raved about him.
Better than he was. I think Beckham was 19 when he went on loan to Preston. Right. And there's only Giggs, I think, who was like 17, 18 in the team, mint. But the rest of them, it was like in and out.
I love that.
Yeah.
No, I heard that for a while.
In terms of midfield, Bruno Fernandes is another one. There was reports in the last week of the window, and I don't know if this was just pure speculation about Saudi interest. I know obviously there had been genuine Saudi interest before that. Bruno basically came out and did an interview about that interest. Do you think there was I don't want to say United wanted him to take that deal, but do you think there didn't seem to be a lot of pushback from United? It felt as though it was like, if you want to go, you can, and you decide. Does that surprise you, given the fact that he's our best player, he's our captain? We didn't let Mainoo leave. There's other players we don't let leave, and yet when it's your biggest and best player, the sort of viewpoint seemed to be, it's up to you, mate. What's that about?
I
Do you get what
What's that about?
How weird is that though? Like, no, you can't go. No, Bruno, what best player for the last 5 years?
I think
you choose. Wait.
The Manu thing was such a pressurised situation, and they do obviously. They've got 4 now, haven't they, midfielders? It's clearly not a balanced 4 really in terms of what you need, but they've got 4, so for those 2 positions really, plus maybe Mason Mount could drop back if needed. Ruben Amorim's mentioned that, hasn't he? So I think that influenced that particular decision. Bruno Fernandes is 30 now, isn't he, right?
31,
so 31 is he, right? So he's of an age where I think a club has to be sort of respectful of his own views. So whilst I think they want him to stay, right? I think that's ultimately it.
Right.
But on the flip side, if you do ultimately get a £100 million offer for a 31-year-old, you kind of have to sort of debate it, don't you? You kind of have to think about it. And if that is what he wants, then to go, then I don't think the club would have stood in his way, because it's up to him really. Like, if they're getting very good compensation for him, it's a tough one to say, because clearly he's such a vital figure for United, not just on the pitch but outside of the pitch. The stuff that he does with the fans I think is a real example to how to conduct yourself as a Manchester United captain, and just as a Premier League footballer really. But so that I think does come into it. But ultimately, if you're looking at it from a sporting point of view, I think there would have been a debate. If he'd have wanted to go and said, I want to go, I can understand why United would be like, okay, that's fine, that's up to you, as long as we're compensated. And I don't know, if they then don't get compensated when the United go, come on, that's not enough, you're worth way more than that, you need to stay with us. And certainly Ruben Amorim had conversations with him. He was very strong, wasn't he? I think was it me that asked him the question after the game in Hong Kong? It's tough. I've asked a few questions, but he basically said he's going to be with us. I think it was me. He's going to be with us. Kind of don't. That's my feeling. He was pretty strong about that. And then Bruno then did the press conference when he was away with Portugal, and as you say, kind of spoke all about it. Al Hilal were very serious about it. I think they even tried to, even after he'd sort of said no to them, raise their offer. It was eye-watering amounts of money that we're talking about here. So, and I know he's a rich man already at that level. How much more money do you need? I don't know how much more does it affect your life, but still, it's I think any of us would have to sort of think about it, right? I don't know. Yeah. But at the same time, he obviously loves football, and playing at this level. Look at the way he celebrated the Burnley goal. He knew how big a goal that was to convert that penalty. He'd missed the penalty the previous week, but he celebrated it with real emotion and sort of fire in his belly. So I'm personally pleased that he wasn't up for going to Saudi Arabia. I think it's a joy to kind of watch him. I know he's not perfect, but he's certainly entertaining.
No, I agree. I know sort of there's been people waiting for Bruno Fernandes to make a mistake or to not perform, to say we should have. There's a lot of people that thought we should have sold him, and I think there's this sort of idea that we sold Bruno Fernandes, we automatically get Baleba, who's going to be better straight away and more suited or whatever. It doesn't always work like that, does it?
21 Baleba. Bruno's 10 years older than him, and has experienced all this. He experienced Sporting when they attacked the training ground, and they've got fans.
Was he there for that?
Yeah, he was at the club at that time.
Wow.
So
that was crazy. And
that's one thing. So I think I mentioned this in a piece I've done recently, where you got Ruben Amorim his name being sung, by the fans, even though they're losing. I think he was, a little bit embarrassed at times about that, and thinking, and that's why he comes out with. I mean, he's very strong emotionally, and the stuff after Grimsby we haven't even touched on, have we? But he comes from that world where he used to manage Sporting, so you've got these fans that are, if you're not performing, we're going to come down to your training ground
and beat you up,
a bit. Yeah, basically, that's effectively what happened. It's absolutely crazy. And I know that caused contract issues with the players and everything. But so I'm not advocating that, but I think that's where Bruno comes. So then you've got that kind of ability to handle the stature of Manchester United, the stage of Manchester United, and so it's not a done deal that just because let's sell him, get this other kid in, it's going to work out.
No, definitely. Listen, we've all said it. Glad he's staying, and hopefully we'll see Bruno Fernandes helping us get back up near the top of the table. And it was good to see that last minute winner from Burnley, what it meant to him. And also some of the criticism was just nonsensical about the way he celebrated. There's people on his case about that.
Oh really? What, he over celebrated?
Yeah, like pundits like look at how far United have fallen the last minute, a 97th minute winner against Burnley, and they're celebrating like that. And you think, have you ever been at a football match? Have you ever experienced anything?
The pressure that was there,
like the pressure, what it meant,
context.
Yeah, like
I cheer like that if I throw a tea bag in a mug from like 2 feet feet away. Like the idea of him celebrating to silence a lot of critics. But genuinely,
Michael Owen with his apple.
Yeah, with his apple core. That's me.
I heard that. I could see it.
He talked about like when he was a kid, he was just so competitive. He used to just love sport. You know, for instance, he'd throw apple cores at the bin, and he knew his mum would tell him off if he missed, but he did it anyway because he had to win.
So separates them
That's
from
Michael
us.
Owen. But I do think that, like, you know, the idea of him celebrating and us as fans celebrating that game with the start to the season he'd had, obviously it was proportionate and, you know, fantastic to be sort of just watching on telly, let alone, you know, being at the game. So
I saw that actually. You didn't watch, did you?
No, my daughter was a miss, so she filmed. I don't watch penalties, so you're
like Ruben, eh?
Yeah. I was like looking towards her. She was filming it because she was like, "Oh, penalty, I'll film it." But yeah, it was mint. And listen, you can criticise United for a lot of things, but celebrating victories is just not anything you can criticise us for, especially our first Premier League win of the season in the 97 minutes. It's just idiotic. That.
If you're doing a team photo, you know, in the dressing room afterwards and posting it, I get that.
Champagne in the dressing room.
We're back. Do you know what I mean? Best victory ever in the history of this club.
Open top bus.
Yeah, it's like, hang on a minute.
Speaking of open top buses, or the opposite of open top buses, losing to Grimsby.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't get much worse than that.
Yeah.
How close was Amorim to quitting Manchester United, either that night or in the days that followed?
Wow, big question. Yeah. How close was it? He says a lot of things that veer towards that, doesn't he? I mean, I felt I was kind of frustrated myself for not knowing what he'd said to ITV, because that was the big interview where he basically said you can change lots of things, but you can't change 22 players again. I'm going to have to speak, you know, during the international, or we'll get to the international break, you know, get Burnley out of the way, get to the international break. So he's obviously getting towards that kind of point of, are you thinking of walking away? Because he'd mentioned this, he spoke about it to us in Chicago when he'd obviously thought this last season, at the end of last season.
It's kind of mad, isn't it?
Yeah. He's an emotional. It is mad. So you kind of let's try and rationalise this. He's an emotional guy, you know, and this he's being honest. At least I do think there's a limit to how honest you can be, and does that then, you know, create a little bit or a big disconnect with your players if you're sort of talking about maybe leaving, you know, do they just disregard it and say it's just him, you know, being him? But yeah, in that moment we were on the pitch at Grimsby at Blundell Park, sort of huddled round him, because it's, you know, there's no at places like this. There was a press room, but it was, you know, small, and Ruben Amorim's not doing a press conference in that space. You know, they do it on the pitch. So, but in that moment, I would have probably said to him, "Are you getting towards, you know, contemplating your future again?" The question I did ask was something like, "What can you do to change this?" And that was when he gave the answer of, you know, "I wish I could give you a really intelligent, you know, reply and go through it in detail, but I've got nothing." You know, and that's an issue in itself, right? Yeah. So how close was it? I don't think he'll walk away, because, you know, let's look at the reality of it. It would be a lot of money that you'd be kissing goodbye to. I know he said without a compensation about compensation at the end of the Europa League final. Now maybe that's because it's all been written down in black and white in his contract.
Too many of these quotes to look back at of our manager threatening to leave or being up for leaving.
And so and also his staff, you know, he's obviously well compensated. Are they, you know, in the same position as him financially? I would doubt it. So, you know, if you walk away, what does that mean for them? Yeah, and up to this point, they are backing him. You know, they've obviously done a transfer window where, you know, a lot of money has been spent. You know, Jim Ratcliffe is on record as saying, "I really like him." You know, he tells me to F off. We'll give it the censored version. Amorim, to his response to us was, "Yeah, I don't BS. You know, again, I'll give it the censored version." He sends me GIFs. I mean, God only knows what GIF Ratcliffe is sending him after the Grimsby game, right? Like, just a
sharpening axe GIF send.
I was thinking more like in tribute to the Mariners and the fish, you know, like some kind of fish slapping GIF.
Oh yeah, maybe, yeah.
Because they were singing "We only sing when we're fishing," which was quite funny. It was I know United lost, but it was
surreal, that is.
Quite an experience to have.
I'm more worried it was like the Donald Trump "you're fired" thing. Do you know what I mean? That might not have gone down too well if he did it. Might have pushed him over the edge.
Yeah. But let's see. I mean, obviously, you know, United have beat Burnley. They've got big fixtures coming up. I think it is important for United and Ruben Amorim to be winning.
What do the press make of all this? What do you guys make of all this? Because you've been covering United for a little while now. You've got a manager who stood in front of you saying all these things almost on a regular basis, and I know some of your colleagues have gone taken in task for it. I think last season when he said United are the worst team, this is the worst United team ever, there was a little bit of pushback there. You've obviously had him saying, there's times when he wanted to quit or he's thought about quitting. It made me laugh where he started throwing his kids under the bus at one point. He said, sometimes I hate my kids. I thought, they're catching strays here. There's no need for this. Just making life worse for you. So you've got to go home in a minute, Ruben. Just stop.
Yeah, that's your salvation.
Yeah, don't start, the wife, I've had enough of her sometimes. I hate her. It's like, don't do that.
Sometimes I hate charities.
Yeah.
I think just like, Ruben, stop. What are you saying?
Meltdown.
Just having to go at everyone for no reason.
What do you guys make of it? Because obviously you're covering a lot. You were covering him pre-season when you were one of a couple of journalists there.
He was great in Chicago. Very personable. You can ask him hard questions. That's the thing, because he is so honest. Obviously, if you're respectful about it, he's obviously in a very pressurised situation, so you don't want to disregard that. But I think you can broach these tough subjects, about his future and things like that, and he's got a disarming way about him that is very personable. And I think for some fans, they will look at him saying about I hate my kids and think, I sometimes hate my kids as well, actually. He's got that everyman kind of quality about him.
Not us, obviously. Don't know what he's on about.
Exactly. But ultimately it comes down to getting results on the pitch and having that connection with your players and being able to get them to do things that you want. And so, for example, the worst squad in history, I think that went down badly with a few players. And now, again, fans might say, well, wind your neck in, you are poor, you need to be told, actually. So you've got that mix of sort of disciplinarian but also, pretty funny guy, I think. But it does just come as a journalist. It's kind of fascinating and it's brilliant to cover, isn't it? Because you've got this kind of very enigmatic character. Stuff could happen at any moment. It's obviously I wrote about the TV smashing episode. Those are kind of I'm not asking for them to happen, but if you have information about that, they're quite exciting stories to get your teeth into and kind of figure out what happened exactly and why did it happen. And it's human, without getting perhaps too high and mighty about it. It's kind of a study of human emotion, isn't it, and psychology. So I think he's certainly a compelling character to have in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, I say this a lot, but I do like Ruben Amorim. I do want him to succeed, and I like the fact he is sort of emotional and raw and honest, and he does come across really well. But like you said,
the sporting fans, when I went over there to Braga, I don't know if you know, I went to Braga for a little background trip.
Do a little press conference.
I don't mention it very often. They absolutely adore him. Like, they were just, obviously devastated that he was leaving in terms of the way he'd interacted with them and the kind of standards that he'd brought the club to. Yeah, so they had a great connection with him.
It's just that thing though, you've got to win, haven't you?
Yeah.
Like we loved Ole. We adored Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and we still do, because of what he did as a player. And also what he did as a manager for a brief time, but
5 goals 10 times. They were the days.
Yeah, when you stop winning, eventually it's like it doesn't matter how much how charismatic you are or your reputation is. People are just going to get fed up of watching us lose football matches. I still think.
And hearing those messages, it's tough. When you're winning, you can sort of repeat messages and be like, it worked for us last time. Yeah, you've got to change it when you lose, or
that's it. And also,
really believe this.
It's kind of like you had that period where I think we all, if it became him or the players, everyone was with him. Yeah. So when he was saying these players aren't good enough or this is the worst, everyone was like, he's right. Yeah. It's like almost not his fault. It's just this garbage that's he's inherited. Yeah. But now it's a bit more like you've got to sort of prove yourself. I think he will. It's just, it does worry me a little bit when I see him so emotional. And I was like, don't do it.
You can't threaten to quit every time we have a bad loss, because eventually people go, well then. Yeah. And obviously, like you said, right now I think there's still a good sort of fan sentiment towards him. But yeah, if it's in 6 months the results haven't turned around and he's saying that, I think people might be a bit more like, good idea actually. Whereas for now, we're all backing him and I love him. But let's move on. Before we go, let's have a look quickly at some of the sales and the outgoings at United. We can kind of do this as a bit of a group. Yeah. Do you think Man United are happy with who they've got out and what they've got them out for?
They're certainly happy with the players that they've got out, because they were obviously the ones that were exiled, right? Apart from Tara Malacia, and that kind of collapsed for different reasons. And I mean, I think that'll just get resolved in a way of maybe even they just sort of come to an agreement over the rest of his contract, right? But I think they're pretty satisfied. I mean, the Rasmus Højlund one, I think I'm impressed with, really, because even before United had kind of told him he wasn't going to feature at all, I would have thought that it would be difficult to get anywhere near the kind of money that they signed him for. And I know it's not. It's it's like half, isn't it? I suppose. But I think it's £5 million loan fee pounds and something like £38 million then on top of that. So you're sort of 43 million for a player that I think, as you said, Jay, fans had kind of decided just wasn't going to cut it at United. So I think that's not a bad deal for United, and certainly it helps the finances. And Rashford, you're getting the wages off, aren't you? So that's quite a big saving, 14, 15 million, something like that. Sancho, similarly, okay, it's not as much as that, but it is a significant saving on the salary. And I think they maybe even weren't sure that it was going to happen, because he'd obviously turned down the Roma deal, which was certainly going to be more financially beneficial to United in terms of a transfer fee. But at least they aren't having to pay him when he's clearly not going to feature for Ruben Amorim. And then Anthony, again, probably at the lower end of the spectrum for what you hoped he might get, because he did have a good loan spell with Real Betis. But if he only wants Real Betis and they haven't got the money, you kind of have to come to some agreement just to figure it out. And then they've got 50% sell on, which is of the profit of the 22 million euro, isn't it, plus 3, so 25 million euro package. So say they then sell him for 50 million euros, United would get half the 25 million, if that makes sense, which is, so again, not a bad, if that happens, let's see. He's at 25, you never know if he goes and stars this season, maybe clubs in Spain might pick him up. So I think they're kind of happy at the fact that they've got the players out that they wanted to get out. Maybe average on the kind of prices, maybe a little bit less. Garnacho's the one as well, isn't it? Sorry, of course. £40 million fee for him. He's worth more than that, isn't he, really? I know they've got a 10% sell on as well, but again, the situation dictated that, and now could they have handled that better? I think they could have handled that one better, where you basically, you sort of keep him around, you kind of make out that he's part of the squad, but ultimately you really want to sell him, because wingers of that ilk could go in for 55 million this summer, basically.
Minimum.
And, so he was still playing for United in the last season, but because it got so emotional after the Europa League final, Ruben Amorim said what he said. It was obvious to Chelsea that that's where he was going. So
that was the one that I said the same. I think of all of these, I think we could have maybe hidden it a bit more with Garnacho.
I think so.
Rashford and Sancho haven't been in the team for months. You can't pretend. Malacia the same. Anthony literally been out on loan. Garnacho, up until the last game of the season, was a Manchester United, one of the first names on the team sheet player, and then all of a sudden he goes from that to he must be sold this summer, otherwise he's going to be sat training with the under-10s. I thought, could Amorim have just held his tongue publicly a little bit on that one and maybe got us an extra 10 million? But again, maybe not. Maybe it couldn't have been like that. Maybe,
that's it. Maybe
you couldn't have him in the training ground, and you would have seen anyway from the fact that he's not playing at all in pre-season and all that. So it's easier said than done, maybe. And
certainly, sorry, just to finish, certainly people think that he felt it was worth there was a value to him to telling him in front of all the teammates this won't be tolerated. So there's a you can't put a price on it, but that in their minds I think was something worth doing.
The sort of cultural reset side of things. It doesn't matter who you are, what it costs the club. If you're not right, see you later. Maybe that works. Fair. And long term, I guess you do have to be like that, don't you?
Well, they've certainly shown more ruthlessness, I think, than previous Manchester United leaderships have done. So let's see if it then leads to better results.
Just seems a bit mad at United, doesn't it?
I think it'll be mad for quite a while.
Do you know what I mean? When you're talking about goalkeepers wanting new contracts and all this, and the manager threatening to quit, and then you've got players being
just got big personalities all over the place. Starting from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who's obviously wanted to change things dramatically.
Ratcliffe deciding whether you want to get a striker or number 6. It's just like, it's all just a bit off its head.
It is a little bit off its head, but plenty more to talk about every time you come on, Laurie. There's plenty to talk about, so that's the upside. Thank you, Laurie, of course, for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
As always.
Always love doing this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks,
make sure you check out the link in the description as well. You can go and check out Laurie on Talk of the Devils and his written work over at The Athletic as well. Hit subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This has been Inside United with Laurie Whitwell. We'll see you in a bit.